everybody, I'm Sarah and I'm a recorder player. Before I get into the video, this week I've been having conversations with some of you on Facebook and Twitter about how I can keep these videos accessible for people with different needs. So from now on, each video will have a link in the description to a transcript of the video, so you can read along while you're watching or separately. And I'm also going to make sure that the captions are updated and correct. Okay, microtones! We're getting into the wonderful world of microtones. What are they? How do you practice them and why? What are microtones? Well, let's see. In Western classical music, we split the octave into 12 equal steps called semitones, and those are the notes on the piano. So in the distance of that octave, we're hitting 12 points along the way. But of course there are so many more options. You can play any note on that spectrum. Those notes between the notes we call microtones. So if we refer to the keys on the piano as semitones or half tones, the notes exactly halfway in between we call quarter tones. Of course, you can play the notes halfway in between those, eighth tones. You could split a semitone into 3 parts, third tones. If this all sounds very weird and contemporary, microtones are actually all over the place. So splitting the octave into 12 equal steps is just one tuning system, just one way of doing it. Throughout classical history, there have been many different tuning systems, and because in these systems the distance between the notes was slightly different, that meant that every note would be pitched slightly higher or lower depending on which key you were in. And yet, these slight differences in pitch can be seen as microtones. Something nerdy, in the 17th century, Christian Huygens, obviously Dutch, mapped out all the possible pitches within the octave, depending on your tuning system and the key you were playing in. To do this, he didn't split the octave into 12 tones, but into 31. Something even more nerdy, in Amsterdam there is actually a microtonal organ built so it can play all 31 tones in an octave. And of course, outside Western classical music, there are many cultures that use microtones just as an integral part of their musical language. In Persian music, Arabic music, ancient Greek music. In Indian classical music, which is built upon groups of notes known as ragas, I was once taught that if you took all the different pitch possibilities from the ragas and the different notes you start on, you would actually split the octave into 96 different degrees. But this just shows that your piano, the Western classical music 12 equal steps, is actually really rigid, and there is so much more outside of that. Ta-da! Luckily the recorder can play all of it. So how would this sound? Let's take a chromatic scale, those are your basic semitones. And I'm going to play a scale with the notes in between, your quarter tones. In the beginning, it's really hard to perceive these tiny differences, but the more you train your ear, they're going to seem huge. Let's zoom in a bit. The difference between E and F, a semitone, we can split into. And now E to F seems like a really big jump. How to play microtones on your recorder. Now, as we all know, the recorder responds incredibly well to breath pressure. Here it's an advantage. So the first way you can approach microtones is by blowing more and less. The disadvantage of doing microtones with your breath is that it's not very accurate, and you're going to have a lot of suddenly loud and suddenly soft sounds in your piece. And I just want to say right now, when you're playing with microtones, accuracy is really important. It's not just playing out of tune. It's good to really train your ear and hit those pitches. So we're going to do it with fingers. To find a quarter tone lower, it's actually very easy. You're going to add fingers lower down the recorder. So we're going to try for a D quarter flat. We've got D and D flat. Those are either side, and you're going to try and find that space in the middle. Going back and forth between the semitones on either side is the way that you're going to train your ear. Low on the recorder, it's going to be a bit more tricky. You might have to use some half holes. To get a quarter tone sharp, you're going to need to do a bit of a workaround. We're going to take the semitone above and then work downwards. Let's try this with E quarter sharp. We start on E, go a semitone up to F, and from there add fingers. When figuring out microtonal fingerings, don't forget to write them down, because I guarantee you'll come back the next day and be like, oh, what was it again? How are microtones notated? Well, the thing is, there's no one standardized way. Sometimes composers make it up a little bit, but here are some common ones. For quarter tone sharp, sometimes it's half of a sharp sign or a sharp sign with an arrow up. For quarter tone flat, sometimes it's a flat sign turned around or symbols with an arrow down. Basically, if you're playing a piece with microtones notated, look in the key. Hopefully they will have bothered to explain it there. Where can you find microtones in recorder music? Well, for a start, you find it in early music all over the place. If you're playing Renaissance consort music, you're playing with a group of recorders and constantly adjusting your tuning, that's microtonal playing. In French Baroque music, you have finger vibrato. Those are microtones. If you've ever used alternative fingerings to create dynamics when you're playing Baroque music, those same fingerings can be used as microtones, just adjust your breath pressure differently. Can become so you could be approaching them musically already without even realising it in your tuning and in your expressive playing. The first contemporary recorder piece to notate microtones explicitly was the classic Fragmente by Shinohara. Notice how I'm achieving those microtones by shading the holes. Some resources if you want to get into microtonal playing. The first is the Quarter Tone Recorder Manual by Peter Bowman and Catherine Bennett. Catherine and Peter are pretty much the authority on microtones. A lot of the information in this video is thanks to them. This book is really comprehensive, it's full of exercises and examples, and they worked with the composer Donald Boosted, who has composed a lot of microtonal music for recorder. They also run the website microtonalprojects.com, where lots more pieces can be found. It turns out there are a lot of websites with microtonal recorder fingerings. I'm going to link them all in the description. And of course, in Walter von Hauer's The Modern Recorder Player, in book 3, he goes into microtonal fingerings as well. So this was a whole bunch of information and resources about microtones with the recorder. The important thing is to really approach them musically as part of the language. It's not about detuning or making it sound weird. Really build how they sound into your ear, and then you can really express the music with them. As always, you can subscribe to my channel by clicking on my face down here. Over here is the Team Recorder Patreon, where you can support the channel. In the description is the web shop where you can buy merch or my album, and up here is a link to my video on tuning. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye!